Welcome to Indie Music Explorer. I'm Dan.
I'm Jack.
And we're the Barton
Brothers.
We are Denver-based songwriters and performers committed to uncovering the tricks and tactics that independent artists are using to succeed in the new music business.
We sit down with creative people of all types to get their insights, and we'll share our own personal thoughts and experiences along the way.
So enjoy the episode.
Welcome back to Indie Music Explorer, everyone. I hope your 2019 is off to a good start. Over here, we are still settling back into life in Colorado, and so far, it is unbelievably nice to be back in the sunshine, connecting with family and friends again. But in the meantime, as we're settling in, we did have a chance to sit down with a really close friend of ours. He's a young man by the name of David Bashford. He is a Los Angeles-based independent musician and filmmaker. He recently graduated from Chapman University with a master's in film, and now that he has graduated, he is kind of splitting time between his pursuits of film and music. So if you are an artist, which I'm assuming most of you are, or you just live in California and you don't know how the hell you're supposed to settle into that giant city, I think David will have a lot of insightful things to say. It was a very special and easy episode for us because we have known David for so long. So as soon as the recorder went, we pretty much started talking and couldn't stop talking for the better part of an hour. So hope you sit back, relax, and enjoy, and hope your 2019 is going well.
Yeah, it was definitely my shortest trip.
But now you've got work to go back to, right?
I do, yeah. I actually have a few music projects that I've kind of been like putting off a little bit just because I haven't had the time to do them. So I tried to carve out a few days to work on stuff.
And are you still doing PA work?
I am. That's like the main gig at CollegeHumor.
Right.
How's that been?
It's all right. It's fun being like on the sketch shoots, and the sketches are all like, it's like stuff that I would want to be making myself if I could. So it's nice to be on sets that are like
doing something you want
in the same sensibility.
What
as
department are you in?
I'm in production.
Okay,
and
that's
so
nice.
Yeah, so like every shoot day, I'm basically like the guy doing the stuff that needs to be done that nobody really wants to do. So like setting up lunch, cleaning up lunch.
Right. Those
doing
hours
script
are
notes.
crazy. Are you on the 6 to 6 kind of schedule?
Yeah, it's a 12-hour day, which is actually great because I get paid hourly, and so after like 8 hours, it's like time and a half, which I really
nice
need. So yeah, if everybody was wondering, I don't get paid very much.
So what are the music projects you're kind of?
So yeah, they've kind of like fallen into my lap more than anything. People in LA who I'm like mutual friends with who don't have the means of like working with a more established producer have found me, and they're like, hey, can you help me with this project? I don't have my own equipment and I can't afford like a real studio.
Right.
And for a while, you were doing that for free, weren't you?
I was doing that for free for a while, and repaying favors to people who had helped me.
Right.
But now that I'm like out in the world,
right? When did you decide that you were going to start charging?
Pretty much as soon as I finished school, where I couldn't take out any more student loans.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, this is a point where, and I feel like also previously I was just nervous about charging people because I felt like I was still in the process of learning. But I feel like I'm to the point now where like it's a skill that is a valuable enough skill to be worth charging people for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And even speaking to some of the people, like the producers, quote unquote producers that they have been working with, who are charging them an arm and a leg, who like could never actually see a project to its like finality.
Right.
So yeah, it definitely feels like, okay, I can offer a service that people
kind of brings up something that I wanted to ask you, because for people who don't know, we've been friends since we were like really little kids, and I remember you playing around with FL Studio when we were maybe 13 or 14, and ever since then you'd been you were early to the ball with video production and audio production, but you've seen firsthand how long it takes to learn production style, and that there's a huge learning curve to even be passable, and then an even bigger learning curve to be elite. So for someone who maybe is like just has an interest like the people that you're talking about that just have musical talent and have no interest or ability, do you think
Right.
it's worth the time to, in any sense, to try and battle that learning curve and try and learn it, or should they just like buck up and spend the money?
Find someone like me who's
Right.
like the middle ground.
Right.
Definitely find someone like me, David Bashford music. No, I think there's like a certain output level that varying levels of musicians are looking for. And if you're just looking to like post a cover on YouTube, I think it's definitely worth investing a little bit to get your own microphone and own like junky interface, or even like a USB microphone, and learning just like going on YouTube tutorials to figure out how to work GarageBand or Logic. But if you're wanting to get a more polished, like fully produced sound, I think there are a lot of people
Like
in
you.
our same, I guess, like arena that are like semi-professional producers that have the equipment and the know-how to like get a way more polished sound than they're capable of without spending an arm and a leg to do it.
And it seems to have a lot to do with like people's like interest level, and this
Yeah.
like goes to production or like music business. Like some musicians are just musicians and don't want to do the business.
Right.
Some musicians are just musicians and cannot like fathom learning a whole new like production technique. And some people are just like, oh wait, I can learn how to do this myself. Like
Yeah.
I can do this business
Which
myself.
has kind of been you the whole time. It
Yeah,
seems
I
like.
also was like, I'm not a good enough musician to ever be just a musician, so I better learn
other
how to
skills.
like to do the more technical side
Yeah,
of
if
it.
people need
That's
to
really
learn how to
interesting.
have a healthy ego, they can talk to you and I. We're really good.
That's really
So
interesting.
let's back up for people obviously who are unfamiliar. Just do a little introduction of yourself and what you're up to these days.
Yeah, so my name is David Bashford. I currently am working in film production in LA, but I have a huge part of me that's still in music production, and hoping that like if that were to work out and be the thing that I kind of make my living doing, I would be totally satisfied doing that. So I try and always kind of keep music projects in the works, either for my own projects or for producing other people's music, or just even like being like an audio engineer to record stuff for people.
Do you find that you've found a good way to balance all your different projects at this point, or what's your way that you set priorities?
I would say generally no. I'm still working to find the right balance. I think because I've always kind of had the safety net of being in school, to say I have all my school projects and I can also work on stuff on the side and like have a small supplemental income from music, but never like depend on that for my main source of income. And
Yeah.
now that I'm like living in LA and needing to subsist, I think it's been a little bit harder to like, okay, I have my like feet definitely in the film lake where I'm like trying to develop a feature-length script so that when my short film goes to a festival, I can have something to pitch to them. But at the same time, working on my friend's thesis student film, composing for them and making some income doing that. And so definitely still trying to find like a balance in just like how I prioritize music and film, and like outside of even creative stuff, just like my own personal work-life balance is definitely something that I'm struggling with, and I'm sure that you guys...
Yeah.
I definitely feel that way, especially because I mean, like you were saying, like what is the right balance of like having enough like different skill sets and irons in the fire that if one of them pops, you can follow it, or what is the point where like I'm spreading myself too thin and I'm never going to be very good at any
Right,
of this?
I'm like not
What
really
is anybody going to call
I'm not
me for?
really specialized in anything, but I feel like I'm pretty good at like 4 different things.
Right, I
and
think
so
we have that too.
So yeah, what is the right point to like throw all of your eggs in one basket and be like, okay, I'm a film director, or I'm a music producer, or I'm an audio engineer.
I'm going to be the person that people call for this.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's also just scary, like, do I really love this one thing enough to like commit to that one thing?
Right.
Or if
Maybe
you choose the one and then you fail at it.
Yeah, then
At
it's
least
like-
if you have like your figures like, well, I mean, anything can happen. But if you commit to one and then blow it. it's like,
Yeah, I think a lot of what I've done in my life is based on just like a general fear of failure.
Yep.
And so So I'm like, well,
advice for the
I'm
world.
going to film school, but also I do music stuff on the side. So like, if I fail at film, I'm also like,
musician.
I dabble in music as well.
Well, we
which
can-
is a great way to live your
Approach
life.
Exactly. Advice for all the kids out there.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to that because you grew up in Fort Collins with us, and we
Right.
were in the same like music circles, and you've
Mhm.
always been a musician. But then you went to the University of Colorado for film.
Right. I went to CU Boulder for undergrad, studying film studies, and then after that, I went to Chapman University for the master film production program that they have there. But then I've also kind of done just like supplementally music as more of a hobby. Like it's been a hobby, but more of a hobby in that like, I guess just in a really elaborate hobby is how I describe it to people. And that's a little bit of like a safe way of like not committing to it so hard that people
Right.
like if it doesn't work out, then people are like, oh, it's just a hobby. He like just does it for fun.
So I can't judge him too harshly.
Yeah.
He said it was a hobby.
Yeah, exactly.
That I was actually going to ask you about this because it seems like I mean, if you didn't just put it out into public that you're just like too scared to commit to one thing, it seems from the outside like a pretty savvy thing. Like you've always been doing music and you went to film school, but your thesis films were
Was a musical,
your
kind
music,
of.
and all
Right.
of it seems like your films at CU were also musicals. So it seems like almost from the outside, like, all right, I'm going to pursue film as an avenue and a venue to get my music out there. Like,
or vice versa. Like,
Yeah.
put my music in movies to make them more special.
Right, which when you like put it the way you just put it, seems like, oh, that's really like
business
a
savvy.
strategic
Yeah.
way to go about it. And really it was more just that like I was gonna make a film and it was kind of like, oh, this is an excuse to get some of my songs in there where people have to like a
listen to
captive audience for at least 10 minutes where they have to listen to
in a theater, yeah.
That's
So
great.
yeah, but I do kind of feel like it is something that sets me apart a little bit as far as filmmaking goes, that it's like, oh, that's just an interesting twist to have this music aspect in addition to like this thriller that you're making, that like genre blending in a very weird way that sets you apart in some way, hopefully.
Right.
So, and it's like a skill set that I have that no one else in my filmmaking class has. So I'm like, I might as well try and take advantage of
At
this
least you're
one
capitalizing
thing.
on something.
Yeah.
Well, it could end up paying off in a lot of ways because as a musician who's done music for short films as a composer and things like that, it seems it's pretty rare that filmmakers and directors like speak music very well, even
Right.
or even very literate to be able to describe what they want. So even if you wind up just being a filmmaker, the fact that you'll be able to speak to composers and music supervisors about what you want.
Right. I mean, like in any film, music is like by far the like shorthand to an emotional response from the audience. And it's like, I mean, we all see the value of music in film, but I think even still it's underrated of like how much of the experience is determined by the music.
Until
in
you
a
watch
film.
like 300 on mute or without the score or something like that,
exactly.
then you
We're
realize.
just like it's just like such a numb experience without that. And so I do feel like having a background in music has helped my filmmaking. And even if music in the end is an elaborate hobby, I'm still like happy with that.
So after CU, you go to Chapman. For anyone out there who is pursuing film at this, like, obviously times are changing a lot with Facebook advertising, and there's a lot of avenues that people can pursue their own things without going through like an institutional route. But do you still find that it was a valuable experience to do the master's for film?
Right now, yes. If you ask me in like 5 years and I'm still like puttering around, I'll be like, it was the worst mistake I've ever made. But for right now, I feel like for me personally, I think it's definitely a personal thing of like, do you want to just go out to LA and like try and get on set being a PA and like seeing from the outside in kind of how it all is operating? Or for me, getting to like be the writer director of 3 highly produced short films was like an invaluable experience. And just, I mean, not just the experience of doing it, but like the people involved in collaborating that now are like part of my network that I can use
That's huge.
to shoot stuff. For me, it was a really good decision, and I definitely don't think it's the right decision for everybody, because there are like peers of mine that just didn't really like have a clear vision of what they wanted their life to be. They're like did film school for 2 years and then dropped out, and they still have those 2 years of student loans without much
Right.
to show for it.
Right. Shout out, by the way, to Vox Girl. Talk about that one a little bit. It was really awesome.
So my thesis short film is called Vox Girl. It's basically it's like a dark comedy thriller about a former kids TV star who has this kind of cult following of people who love the show, but she's trying to distance herself and legitimize her own music career, and kind of the aftermath of those two things colliding, basically.
Yeah. From someone who knew you, watching that, it was probably the most David Bashford thing I could ever have imagined. It was the perfect 80s pop, a little bit of drama, musical, but I thought it was unbelievable.
Thank you.
Is there a place that people can go find that? If they
So it's actually currently on the film festival circuit.
Oh, great.
Which means that it can't be online, because it can't be like a public thing that anybody can watch. So hopefully you can check it out on like Facebook or Instagram. Just look up Vox Girl, like VOX Girl, and hopefully it'll be at a festival near you.
Right.
But eventually it'll be on Vimeo, and people can check it out that way.
What is the latest with the festival circuit? Having like hung out with a lot of filmmakers in New York, that seems like really exhausting, especially with shorts. Like, you know, in a perfect world, you write an amazing short that like spins around the festival circuit and like, oh my God, we need a feature. Yeah. Otherwise, you know, it's a huge jump between making those like 5 to 15 minute films and getting a feature produced, you know, from whatever 10,000 to many hundreds of thousands of dollars. How's that experience been for you trying to get into that world?
You know, it feels like the first result that you described of like what you hope happens when you go to a festival, I think is nearly impossible, to be honest. I think really what I've kind of like, I guess, just decided was going to be the fate of this film was that in the best case scenario, it goes to a lot of festivals and a lot of people get to enjoy it. And like I make connections to some degree where like, even as like in a lateral type of way of networking where it's like, oh, you're a cinematographer for this film that I really enjoyed. Let's collaborate on this next project. More than like finding a producer who's going to finance my feature film. That just is so unlikely that I think it's just a way to get a little bit of like validation and have an audience get to see it and get to meet hopefully a lot of like-minded people. I think that's kind of the like realist approach that I've taken to the festival circuit, because I think it's just as kind of a pipe dream to think that like your short film is going to be seen by someone who has the means to finance a feature film. Right. And like, if anything, I know not like direct friends of mine, but filmmakers that I follow who have been able to build an audience that way, where then they can do a Kickstarter and have enough people that they can like finance their next thing, but it's not ever one person that like sees your film. Yeah. But then again, they always say you never know who's going to see your project or hear your music or whatever. That's going to be like the person that it just speaks to in a way that they need to see the thing you do. Well,
I think we're kind of lucky. This is for filmmakers and musicians that in terms of being a niche artist of any genre, this is about the best time you could ever hope for in terms of how cheap it is to do Facebook advertising that specifically targets people who are going to love 80s horror pop movies. But in terms of that, we've noticed that with your music stuff, you've been really up to date and doing a good job with all your social media and doing all the advertising and doing all these projects. Like, have you, where did you come about finding those things, and what's your biggest tip for people that are kind of starting to explore those avenues?
You know, to be honest, I feel like the marketing and branding aspect is the most difficult out of anything, because I feel like anybody who's really wanting to pursue independent music, the making music part of it is the part that comes easily. Right. But like having a vision for what you think, like your identity in music, and like kind of trying to like brand my face to be like, do I want my face to be the brand of David Bashford music? I don't want that at all. But it's kind of it's kind of
another,
like
ego.
Nobody wants that.
Trust me, we're all on the same page.
It's kind of like an inevitable thing where if you want your music to be heard, you need to have some type of personality that people want to attach to your music. Like it's not enough to just have really good music. You need to be like someone that people are compelled by, to be like, oh, I love Jack and Dan Barton, so I'm going to click on their, like, I'm going to like this Instagram post because I like Jack's face. And also, there's a link to their music. Okay, I'll listen to that as well.
Right.
That is really, yeah. Again, it reminds me of what we were just talking about building different skill sets. Now, like social media and marketing being one of those, because it's like a unique like cross section of things that you have to be like good at and interested in. Because if you're just a musician, there's a lot of talented musicians who are terrible at marketing and hate it. But a lot of like independent artists get a really bad rap because there's a lot of terrible artists who are really good at marketing themselves and like pushing their crap in front of people. And it's kind of rare to get people who are really talented and who are willing to do the marketing.
I have a good friend who is a successful independent musician, and she is very forthcoming in saying that she wants to be admired for her like business ability and marketing ability more than her music, because she'll like have people come up to her and say like, "Oh, you do this music, what do you do for your day job?" And she's like, "No, I'm able to do music full time because I'm such a good businesswoman." And I'm skilled in the marketing aspect and like keeping up with every social media platform that just is like almost, I mean, the music has to be good, but you have to have such a good sense and like diligence in your
consistency. Really.
Yeah, in your social media output and like branding.
It's a really smart approach, like, because like having that attitude can preempt a lot of the criticism that you can get. Like, if you're confident in that, is like, as long I know I've got this. I know I've got business skills. Like, I know I've got something that people want. I'm not just like some starving artist, and that's what you have to latch on to.
Well, speaking of that question, which I think we get all the time as musicians, is in differing degrees of condescension. Like, what do you do for your job? Like, how do you really make money?
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, that's a different answer. But have you found that transitioning to LA, that's something you deal with less because it's such an artist community?
That's a good question. I feel like everybody in my circle is like, "Oh yeah, I do this for my job, but I'm really pursuing this thing." That is just kind of like a known fact.
It's implied.
That no one who's in my circle has like quote unquote made it yet, and so it's just pretty much assumed that you're doing one thing, but like ultimately you're trying to do this thing.
Yeah, if you meet someone out and they say, "Oh, what do you do?" Like, no one wants to know the name of the restaurant you work at. They want to know like what your hustle is.
Right, exactly.
Whereas that's like a nice shorthand to have in places like LA and New York that maybe we don't have in Colorado, because like there's less context for people who are like, chasing an artistic dream. So
right.
That is kind of nice.
Have you found that in terms of, I think LA and New York and big cities, there's always a sense of dealing with rejection, and it's like ubiquitous for everyone that you meet.
Yeah.
Have you found tips for how to deal with that as you've kind of navigated the system a little bit?
I think, to be honest, I'm like just at the beginning of my rejection phase. Like,
I'll let you know.
I've definitely felt it, like just in terms of like festival submissions for the past 2 years. But I would say that like just continuing to make stuff and find people that do respond to that, because there's undoubtedly someone who's gonna respond to it, even if it's your mom. I've had a lot of nights where the one person I can call on to like really like give me a pat on the back is my mom, and even though I know that she's doing it just because she's my mom, it's like you have to find somebody who's gonna give you that little boost, and I think it just is a matter of like taking the energy to find your niche and find your demographic of people that's gonna give you those like boosts when you're really feeling bummed out about things.
And at this point, it feels like at least the three of us, we know that we're all in at this point, because I remember we've been dealing with like posting songs and videos online since we were 13 and getting, one like from our grandma. We're like, this next one's going to be the one, man.
Right.
And it never was the one.
No, it's never the one.
It's never the one.
It's never the one.
But at this point, there's a sense that we're all in. So it's kind of like, you just have to find a way to navigate the mental talk.
Right. And I also feel like the game has changed a little bit as far as like the social media aspect of it goes. Because I remember, and maybe it's just because the novelty of me posting about my projects has worn off, but I remember back in the day, I would post something and people would be like, "Whoa, David, you did a thing, and this is so cool."
None of my friends do things, and then it blows up.
And now that I've been posting stuff for the last like 8 years, even though I feel like it's better than anything I've ever done, it's like, oh, David has posted another thing.
That's so insightful.
Absolutely.
I guess I have to give him another pat on the back because,
he's still trying.
And so I guess the goal is to find people outside of your
That's
like
what I was gonna say,
your
like-
friends and family that are like they really respond to your work in a way outside of just like an obligation to you as a friend or a family member.
I think that's a big tip, and that we're trying to constantly remind ourselves that the first few songs we were putting out, we were just purely basing our ego on how many likes it got.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, like that's the worst way you could think about it is how well your song does in your circle, because our
Right.
circle is like people we went to high school with,
Right.
and like vague connections from college. Like that is not the people we're trying to impress.
No.
At all. Like we're trying to find people who really like Ben Folds, who also like musicals. Like those,
Yeah.
those are the niches we're trying to attack. Like
Right.
if like my second cousin was like, no, it's fun.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you guys have found that once you find the people that respond the right way, then like you just start to build on top of that, and just even for your own like ego, so just as like finding people that have an understanding of what you're trying to do and like they appreciate the output.
That's huge.
Because I think of my close circle of friends, and the tastes are so like such a wide variance that you can't expect those people to like fall in love with everything that you put out there just because it's not in their taste.
Yeah,
And
we
that's
definitely
okay.
we all have like close friends that are like total like music nerds, film buffs, and so I'm sure we've talked about this in the back of our mind. Like you're trying to like impress like the inner voices of your like close friends who have like really fancy taste, and that can be really hard. It's like once again like no, this isn't for them. I can't be like writing to these people who.
Some old college friends who I know might not like it.
Right.
I mean, this applies to film as well, where it's like if you base the reaction of the like the not intended demographic, like on the success of your film, like if you're like, oh, this group, like I can think of a specific editing class that I had where at the end of the class, everyone has to like say, I loved it, I liked it, it was okay, or I hated it. Like you had to respond in one of those ways. And you're like hearing from all these people that clearly this was not your intended audience, and they're like all indifferent about it. And it's like you're heartbroken because they didn't love it. But then you're like, well, this was never who it was written for in the first place. And so it's hard to like gauge success because it's just like a moving target where I don't know, if you're aiming at the wrong place, it's never going to be the result that you wanted.
Right. And, if you get too caught up in that and, like, decided to put all of your energy into impressing those people, all of a sudden, like, oh, wait, now I'm successful with the group of people I was never trying to impress in the first place.
Like I've made something that I
Crap.
don't even really like myself at all.
Yeah.
And so what's the point?
Yeah. Well, talk a little bit about LA and what your experience has been there so far.
So, yeah, I guess compared to a lot of people, it's just been like a blip of time because I've been there like 5 months.
Right.
And so it's a pretty...
But you were nearby for...
Yeah, I was living in Orange County and up in LA. And so it's more than some people have had. I would say, there's just my main impression is just how many people are there hustling, trying to do the same thing as you. And like in our northern Colorado, like suburbia town, when you're like one of 4 people that you know that are trying to pursue a career in entertainment, it's like, okay, we've kind of risen to the top out of the small number of people who don't even really want to pursue this thing anyway. But then when you show up in this big town where like literally everybody that I work with is like, oh yeah, I'm like actually a screenwriter though. Like don't tell anybody, but I'm a screenwriter.
Because everybody's working on a script,
Yeah, exactly.
Does that feel
like,
toxic after a while, or?
I mean, I was kind of expecting it just because it's such a cliche, and like I found the cliche to be absolutely true.
Pilot season comes around.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say for my own ego, I'm like working on it not being so toxic because I definitely like you just even like going to a restaurant or a bar and you see 20 people who like look exactly like you and you're like, oh, I'm just another white guy trying to like do this subversive thing that isn't really subversive at all because everyone else is trying to do the same thing. So yeah, it's definitely a struggle, but like, I don't know. You also then see the things that people are working on and you realize that like most people are actually kind of hacks just to like be honest about it. Like most people are going to fail and you just have to know that like if you really believe in your work, that it's gonna outlast all those other people.
Right. That's a really interesting point. God, yeah, that's so true. I remember being in college, and I think it was my accompanist when I was taking voice lessons said something about, well, like only 5% of people with music degrees like make a full-time living in music. Something super helpful.
Thanks.
Cool. That it's so tempting to be like depressed about that, but then I'm like, all right, well, I'm in this music school, and most of these people suck.
Right.
So like, why would I be bummed that they're not going to be successful? Like,
Right.
and count myself among those statistics?
Right.
Because that's not really fair. Like you said, like some people are incredibly talented, but a lot of people just like, you can't count yourself as their competition because it's either not the same target audience, so there's
Right.
no competition,
Right.
or it's just not there.
Yeah, even like Chapman, which is like a pretty renowned film program, you see some of the films that are made there, and you're like, how is this possible?
How did you get out of here?
Yeah, and so it's like depressing, but also like very like validating for my own projects, where it's like, okay, people are gonna like find their way in whatever way they can, but they're not really my competition because we're just like aiming for such different things that it doesn't really matter.
Totally. Well, to wind things down a little bit from a serious note, we kind of like to wrap things up with some questions about what you've been listening to lately. Anything popping out to you lately?
This is kind of old news, and everybody loves Kacey Musgraves.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, just quickly, if you haven't listened to Golden Hour, you ought to right now.
I'm one of those. I have not listened to Golden Hour.
But also another band that I've really been loving is The Night Game. It kind of has that like 80s throwback thing to it. It's actually the lead singer of
Boys Like Girls.
Boys
right?
Like Girls. That's right. Yeah. And so it's got like it's a real pop band for sure, but they feel a little bit more thoughtful in their like production. Like he's got a really good series on YouTube where he kind of sits down and breaks down a lot of the songs.
Oh, really?
And how he was clearly very involved in the production of all of them. And so it just is really interesting to see, like, on the exterior, he's got this real, like, rock star thing where he's like...
Yeah, definitely. We've looked
But then,
into it as well.
but then you watch a video of him and he's, like, speaking like a normal human. And you're like, oh, okay, it's all just kind of fronting as this like,
persona,
cool
yeah.
guy. But really, like, everything is so thought out in
Right.
every song.
That's cool.
So I definitely would recommend.
Charlie Puth and Calvin Harris have also done like behind the scenes production
Yeah.
stuff,
Those
and we
are
can't get
awesome.
enough of that.
Oh,
so
yeah,
I'll
those
check
are
that
so
out,
much
yeah.
fun.
And also, on top of that, I know that you and I both have an insane amount of guilty pleasures, but
Mhm.
if you had to give a top 3 that you're onto these days,
Oh, a top 3 guilty pleasures. Oh,
songs
man.
or artists?
Songs or artists? Well, this also isn't like the most recent, but What Lovers Do, I believe is the name of the song by Maroon 5 with SZA.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
The
yeah,
first time I heard it come on, I was like, this is the dumbest song ever. Adam Levine is a total hack. And then by like the third time, I was like bopping so hard that I like couldn't even control it. So that's
Oh, right. Okay, I've
definitely
heard that one, yeah.
that's definitely one for sure. I still am on a Shania.
Going on a
Shania,
16-year long.
You know, she just came out with an album in the last year, and it's not profound. I will say that for sure. But she's still very fun, and
Right.
I like just enjoy her thing.
Right.
I
think we would be remiss not to talk about One Direction.
and of course, One Direction. I often find myself defending One Direction.
I find that as
even
well.
though they've been on hiatus for like over a year.
We're defending a band that's not even remotely popular anymore.
I know no one's dissing them, but I just want to get on my soapbox.
I know that y'all stopped dissing them in 2013.
I think it's one of those things where they started as a bubblegum pop boy band, and their
Right.
music was like objectively pretty bad. But then whoever their collaborators were,
Those songwriters.
Oh,
yeah, they
Shout
just
out
like
John Ryan. Oh my
yeah, they
God.
just like I don't know. We're working with people who were able to tap into the classic rock meets modern day pop thing that I
Right.
think is really very fun.
And for those of you who haven't seen it, which is probably, I'm sure you all have, but we did, what was it, 2014, we did a 16-song mashup of
We did
One
a giant One
songs.
Direction mashup. Definitely not trying to like exploit 12-year-olds' love of One Direction in an attempt to get a bunch of views, but more out of just a love of
Just
One
sheer-
Direction.
Right, and that was how, because did not give a flying hoot about One Direction until that happened, and then
Yeah.
I was like, had 16 songs, and they've been in my Spotify top 3 every year.
It's pretty
Well,
fantastic.
beautiful. Well, any other questions as we're wrapping up?
I guess not really. I guess, if you wanna monologue a little bit about like any recommendations you have for people who are considering making the jump from anywhere in Middle America to LA to pursue music or film, and then let people know
What you're
where they
doing.
can keep up with you and see what you're up to.
Sure. Yeah, I would say, it's different for everybody. For me, I definitely feel like if I had just moved to LA outright out of high school, I can almost say with like utmost certainty that I would have moved back to Colorado in 3 months, just because I had no built-in network and no sense of like what I wanted to do. And so if you are that way, I would say like, you can look, I took a great online program in music production through Berkeley Online, which like kind of helped solidify some of my interests. But if you do really feel like you would know with complete certainty, then you can move to LA, and there's like Facebook groups for like, I need production assistants that they'll take just about anybody if they're in enough of a pinch. And so you can start to get exposure that way, and just like really, it's such a like stupid cliche, but I found it to be so true that it's just in who you know, and like networking with people who have the same interests as you, that's what's really going to be the most beneficial to you. And without segueing at all, as far as my my like social media stuff, you can find me at Bashford Film. I'm actually working on a new YouTube series of basically, I haven't come up with a name for it yet, but it's basically like musicals about mundane moments or situations. And so
Genius.
yeah, and so it's kind of a way to like tap into having a lot of like being able to produce short films that I can say I directed, but also, use some of my musical skills that I've developed.
Any examples of like the mundane features that are going to get musical treatment?
Yeah, so a little sneak peek for the first one that will be coming out that I've actually recorded with a like semi-famous YouTuber by the name of Jon Cozart. Maybe some of you have heard of him. It's about a guy who his girlfriend is moving in with him, and they're going through clothes to donate because there's not enough room in the closet. And he finds a cardigan that he is very attached to. And it's kind of about his sense of loss that he has in losing this cardigan. And it's just like a really sincere musical treatment of this guy's sadness that he has about losing this cardigan. And it kind of goes down an absurd path in the end.
That's
But
great.
yeah, that's
10
kind
of
the
those,
general.
please.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
love that.
That
Well,
sounds
awesome,
great.
man. Thanks
Well,
for stopping
David
in.
Yeah, thanks
Bashford,
so much
good to
for
see you,
having
man.
me. I kind of babbled and rambled, but
That's the whole point.
Exactly. That's what we brought you here for.
Sweet.
perfect.
Thanks, dude.
Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
Thank you.
That's it for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy what you hear, please consider subscribing, rating, and leaving a review. If you want to learn more about what we're up to, you can go to thebartonbros.com and find us at the Barton Brothers on Instagram and Facebook. We will see you next time.